Shout out to Layla. Thank you for joining. Write your name in the chat if you want me to shout you out. Shout out to Renee. Shout out to Caitlin. Shout out to Camila. Shout out to, you're welcome. Thank you, Elizabeth. I hope you have a great day too. Shout out to Allison. You're welcome. Shout out to Cadence. Shout out to Emily. Hello, welcome. Shout out to Axel. Shout out to Kashi. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to Iva or Eva. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. You're welcome, Axel. Shout out to Arbani. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to Jesha. Shout out to Elena. Shout out to Kimmy. Oops. Shout out to Shirley. Shout out to Naomi. Shout out to Iggy. Shout out to Shania. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to Izzy. Hello everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining. Shout out to Aranza. Shout out to Lily. Shout out to Malaya. Shout out to Charlotte. Shout out to Arthur. Shout out to Kyleel. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Hermione. Hello everyone, welcome. Write your name in the chat if you want me to shout you out. Shout out to Jada. Shout out to Danya. Shout out to Cece. Shout out to Landon. Shout out to Allie. Shout out to Jacob. Shout out to Hannah. Shout out to Sienna. Shout out to Jolina. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Aina. Did I spell it correctly? I don't know if I did. No, I didn't. Shout out to Aina. Shout out to... I still didn't spell it correctly. I'm so sorry. Thank you for your patience. Shout out to Samuel. Shout out to Indy. Shout out to Mia. Shout out to Aurora. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Isla. Shout out to Sunghoon. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Crystal. Shout out to Gia. Shout out to Maitha. Or Maitha. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Vidya. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Alina. Shout out to Asher. Like and subscribe if you enjoy the shout outs. I also post other content. I hope you can check it out and support. Thank you so much for being here. Shout out to Camille. Shout out to Sunny. Shout out to Emmanuel. Shout out to Brianna. Shout out to Madeline. Shout out to Shasha. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Avery. Shout out to Cassidy. Shout out to Nick. Shout out to Susan. Shout out to Isabella. Shout out to Ryan. Or Ryan. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Ariella. Shout out to Hannah. Shout out to London. Shout out to Mackenzie. Shout out to Charlie. Shout out to Evie. Shout out to Brianna. Shout out to Kira or Kyra. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Nina. Shout out to Addie. Shout out to Kalanis. Shout out to Sapphira. Shout out to Anaya. Shout out to Sammy. Shout out to Kinsley. Shout out to Naomi. Shout out to Amy. Shout out to Flame. Shout out to Reese. Shout out to Leland. Shout out to Alika. Shout out to Kyle. Shout out to Easton. Shout out to Alexandra. Shout out to Zoe. Shout out to Reagan. Shout out to Deandra. Shout out to Amber. Shout out to Shay. Shout out to Hamza. Shout out to Kaden. Shout out to Kashbi. Shout out to DJ. Shout out to Mason. Shout out to Lily. Shout out to Lizzie. Shout out to Jace. Shout out to Kevin. Shout out to these people. On to the next page. Thank you so much for your patience. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy the shout outs. I also post other content that I hope you can check out as well. Thank you so much for being here. Write your name in the chat if you want me to shout you out. Shout out to Chris. Shout out to Leah. Shout out to McKenna. Shout out to Skylar. Shout out to Analia. Shout out to Kylie. Shout out to Cassandra. Shout out to Sophia. Shout out to Lavender. Shout out to Asher. Shout out to Selena. Shout out to Brooklyn. Shout out to Louisa. Shout out to Mateo. Shout out to Annalise. Shout out to Lauren. Shout out to Tracy. Shout out to Christine. Shout out to Maddox. Shout out to Aubrey. Shout out to, was it Susan? Happy birthday. Shout out to Chrissy. Shout out to Melissa. Shout out to Milagros. Shout out to Ramsey. Shout out to Vivian. Shout out to Aileen. Shout out to Manel. Shout out to Katu. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Jules. Shout out to Daryl. Shout out to, whoopsie, Susanna, happy birthday. Shout out to Grace. Shout out to Amelia. Shout out to Annie. Shout out to Kay, what was it? Kay Spades. Shout out to Bella Rose. Shout out to Serenity. Shout out to Lulu. Shout out to Donna. Shout out to Daniela. Shout out to Charlie. Shout out to Sammy. Shout out to James. Shout out to Catalina. Shout out to Ayani. Shout out to Camila. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Caitlin. Shout out to Mackenzie. Shout out to Luz. Shout out to Riley. Shout out to Jeffy. Shout out to Manon. Shout out to Alaya, or Alea, sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to you're welcome, Katu. Shout out to Aisha. Shout out to Yunche. Shout out to Lillian. Shout out to Annie. Shout out to Connie. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to Shahali. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Mila. Shout out to Yadianis. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to Samantha. Shout out to Athena. Shout out to Maddie. Shout out to Hannah. Shout out to Heaven. Shout out to Nelly. Shout out to Galaxy. Shout out to Miliana. Shout out to Stephanie. Thank you, Stephanie, for subscribing. Shout out to Liam. Shout out to Raji. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to happy early birthday, Xenix. Shout out to Xenix. Shout out to Angela. Leave a like if you're enjoying the live stream. Thank you so much for being here. Shout out to Davina. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Sky. Shout out to Sprout. Shout out to Romina. Shout out to Cassidy. Shout out to Alyssa. Shout out to Amelia. Shout out to Macy. Shout out to Iggy. Shout out to Ashlyn. Shout out to Elena. Shout out to Zaid. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Romina. Shout out to Anna. Shout out to Robert. Shout out to Summer. Shout out to Helen. Shout out to Julian. Shout out to Kelly. Shout out to Chloe. Shout out to Milani. Shout out to Timothy. Shout out to Leah. Shout out to Elsie. Shout out to Remy. Shout out to these people. Like and subscribe if you're enjoying the live stream. I also post other content. I hope you can check it out as well. Thank you for your patience. Write your name in the chat if you want me to shout you out. Shout out to Isabel. Shout out to Ben. Shout out to Monroe. Shout out to Quavo. Shout out to Aslan. Shout out to Joy. Shout out to Stephen or Steven. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Jack. Shout out to Riley. Shout out to Alex. Shout out to Israel. Shout out to Ariana. Shout out to Emery. Shout out to Maria. Shout out to Robin. Shout out to Leanne. Shout out to Nicole. Shout out to Aurora. Shout out to Sandra. Shout out to Elena. Shout out to Catherine. Shout out to Scarlett. Shout out to Amaris. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Alexis. Shout out to Kinsley. Shout out to Jenilyn. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Michelle. Shout out to Kaya. Shout out to Sunny. Shout out to Avery. Shout out to Aaliyah. Shout out to Mick. Shout out to John B. Shout out to CJ. Shout out to Journey. Shout out to Ryder. Shout out to Marina. Shout out to Aubrey. Shout out to Sadir. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Yasmin. Shout out to John. Shout out to Lucas. Shout out to Benji. Shout out to Aser. Shout out to Kyra. Shout out to Nicholas. Shout out to Angela. Shout out to Amara. Shout out to Jasmine. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Ryan. Shout out to Caesar. Shout out to Taj. Shout out to Ellery. Shout out to Alice. Shout out to Raji. Shout out to Olivia. Shout out to Brooke. Shout out to Ashley. Shout out to Cambry. Shout out to Cruz. Shout out to Tiana. Shout out to Tutu. Happy early birthday. Shout out to Tiana. Oh, I already put Tiana. Shout out to Nicole. Shout out to Aaron. Shout out to Kaden. Shout out to Julie. Shout out to Anaya. Shout out to Lila. Shout out to Ariella. Shout out to Matilda. Shout out to Janice. Shout out to Amelia. Shout out to Declan. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Michelle. Shout out to Kamoya. Shout out to Pedro. Shout out to Jacob. Shout out to Haven. Shout out to Riker. Shout out to Sophia. Shout out to Gavin. Shout out to Everly. Shout out to Joplin. Shout out to Fred. Shout out to Yasmirina. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Khalees. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Raymond. Shout out to Maya. Shout out to Shad. Shout out to Rocky. Shout out to Mel. Shout out to Tyrone. Shout out to Eliza. Shout out to Annalise. Shout out to Issa. Shout out to Eddie. Shout out to Astrid. Shout out to Parker. Shout out to Addie. Shout out to Coco. Shout out to these people. On to the next page. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy the shout outs. I also post other content. I hope you can check it out and support as well. Thank you for being here. Write your name in the chat if you want me to shout you out. Shout out to Gloria. Shout out to Amari. Shout out to Everly. Shout out to Riley. Shout out to Zara. Shout out to Caleb. Shout out to Jackson. Shout out to Will. Shout out to Akeisha. Shout out to Amaris. Shout out to Reed. Shout out to Jerry. Shout out to Jacob. Shout out to Carol. Shout out to Najwa. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Lewis. Shout out to Fred. Shout out to David. Shout out to Mel. Shout out to Murray. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Milo. Shout out to Davis. Shout out to Aubrey. Shout out to Luna. Shout out to Alicia, or Alicia. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Tim. Shout out to Haley. Shout out to Poria. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Annika. Shout out to Renata. Shout out to Eden. Shout out to Sam. Shout out to Jazzy. Shout out to Scarlett. Shout out to Emily. Shout out to Selena. Shout out to Maka. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Penny. Shout out to Willow. Shout out to Eddie. Shout out to Milana. Shout out to Kalia. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Timmy. Shout out to Mike. Shout out to Olivia. Shout out to Hunter. Shout out to Addie. Shout out to Lucky. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Suri. Shout out to Lulu. Shout out to Iriana. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for subscribing. I truly appreciate it. Shout out to Mason. Shout out to Dusty. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Emily. Shout out to MJ. Shout out to Angel. Shout out to Sam. Shout out to Raven. Thank you for subscribing. Is it Raven? Let me know if I need to rewrite your name. Shout out to Nicholas. Shout out to Ray Ray. Shout out to Imperial. Shout out to Skylar. Shout out to Janae. Shout out to Landon. Shout out to Marley. Shout out to Kyrie. Shout out to Matthias. Shout out to Jeremiah. Shout out to Adrian. Shout out to Liv. Shout out to Bryn. Shout out to Lugo. Shout out to Rena. Shout out to Enzo. Shout out to Emma. Shout out to Maya, or Mia. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to Kai. Shout out to Jace. Shout out to Nitara. Shout out to Morgan. Shout out to Cleo. Shout out to Riker. Shout out to Morgan. Shout out to Savannah. Shout out to Victoria. Shout out to Deku. Shout out to Beckett. Shout out to Koo. Shout out to Faith. Shout out to Athena. Shout out to Ali. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Skylar. Shout out to Nora. Shout out to Matthew. Shout out to Ava. Shout out to Anaya. Shout out to Presley. Shout out to Ant Baseball. Shout out to Layla. Shout out to Shigaraki. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Boriana. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to these people. On to the next page. Thank you so much for being here. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy the live stream. I also post other content. I hope you can check it out as well. Leave a like if you're enjoying the live stream. Also, thank you for your patience. Let's try to get to 200 likes. We're almost there. Shout out to Sophia. Shout out to Aaliyah. Shout out to Albie. Whoopsie, messed up. Oh my gosh, I messed up again. Let me just try over here. Shout out to Anaya. Shout out to Ivana. Thank you for your patience. Shout out to Miriam. Shout out to Monica. Shout out to Beckham. Shout out to Embry. Shout out to Sadie. Shout out to Kamoya. Shout out to Serenity. Shout out to Oliver. Shout out to Corbin. Shout out to Will. Shout out to Grace. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Tessa. Shout out to Maria. Shout out to Maya. Shout out to Wishlane. Shout out to Zach. Shout out to Anna. Shout out to Hillary. Shout out to Sky. Shout out to Isabella. Shout out to Paris. Shout out to Rita. Shout out to Amaris. Shout out to Kaden. Shout out to Clover. Shout out to Cosmo. Shout out to Fred. Shout out to Iker. Shout out to Ryan. Shout out to Prince. Shout out to Iran. Shout out to Ace. Shout out to Mel. Shout out to Samantha. Shout out to Emmy. Shout out to Dustin. Shout out to Kaishin. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Violet. Shout out to Jack. Shout out to Jacob. Shout out to Mac. Shout out to Ezekiel. Shout out to Jim. Shout out to Max. Shout out to Agatha. Shout out to Brazil. Shout out to Aubrey. Shout out to Michael. Shout out to Kylie. Shout out to Eli. Shout out to Graceland. Shout out to Amarielle. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Sarah. Shout out to Liv. Shout out to Noah. Shout out to Marcella. Shout out to Sunil. Shout out to Musib. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to Ezra. Shout out to Andy. Shout out to Lily. Shout out to Tim. Shout out to Cece. Shout out to Anna. Shout out to Rigby. Shout out to Shoko. Shout out to Isabella. Shout out to Bree. Shout out to Audrey. Shout out to Hannah. Shout out to Elena. Shout out to Mariella. Shout out to Elena. Oh, I just put Elena. Shout out to Azea. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to Bella. Shout out to Lindsay. Shout out to Vicky. Shout out to John Dave. Shout out to Natalie. Shout out to Orlando. Shout out to Issa. Shout out to Lincoln. Shout out to Mavis. Shout out to Finn. Shout out to Avery. Shout out to Samsky. Shout out to Lainey. Shout out to Emma. Shout out to Nate. Shout out to Lucas. Shout out to Sammy. Shout out to Laura. Shout out to Manon. Shout out to Tyler. Shout out to Dash. Shout out to these people. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy the shout outs. I also post other content. I hope you can check it out and support my channel. I truly appreciate you being here and taking the time to write your name. Take care. I live stream every day. I will see you next time. Bye.